the News Channel 5 network, this is MorningLine with Nick Barris.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us on MorningLine on this cold and snowy, kind of icy Tuesday morning. So stay inside and stick with us on the conversation this morning. Great topic as we continue our month-long look at our News Channel 5 Investigates team's expose, if you will, broken, and looking at the juvenile justice system, juvenile crime, a big issue that affects us all. And we do stories on it every day here at News Channel 5. A lot of them pretty darn depressing. And I think it's something worth looking at. We've got a great panel of guests this morning to talk about it and get into the next stage. We had Phil Williams on. Now we have News Channel 5's Jennifer Kraus with us. Good morning.
Good morning.
To you. Thanks for coming in so early this morning. And also thank you, Jim Todd, attorney with us. Many of you know Jim from many stories we've done on this. You're a private attorney now,
I am.
But dating back in some of Jennifer's stories, you worked with the district attorney's office and were over at juvenile courts. All right, broken. Jen, we know the big umbrella topic, and Phil came on, originally to talk about some of what he's done. Your aspect of it is looking at some of these youngsters that got into some trouble and where they are today.
Two particular cases. We decided to go back and look at these cases. Back in the 90s, they shocked Nashville. First, a 13-year-old, Andrew Jefferson, was arrested for murder, and not long after that, a 12-year-old, Terrence McLaurin, was arrested for murder. And we interviewed both of them when they were in prison in 2003 to talk to them about, how they wound up there and what they were going to do when they got out. Well, we decided as our part of this project to go back and find out what happened to them 16 years later. When we interviewed Andrew Jefferson in prison, he was very angry and tough and said when he got out of prison, he would do whatever he had to survive.
This was back when?
This was back in 2003. Okay. Meanwhile, Terrence McLaurin was talking about how he had changed. He had been forgiven by, the victim's family. He was doing so much to turn his life around. So we wanted to see, how did things work out? So we went back to talk to them. Andrew Jefferson, both of them were behind bars when we started working on this. Andrew Jefferson is back in prison, and we got inside the Trousdale Trousdale Correctional Center and got a rare prison interview with him.
He was willing to talk with you.
He was.
Well, now McLaurin?
No, this was Andrew Jefferson.
I know.
Terrence McLaurin, through his attorney, turned down our interviews. He was in jail at the time.
Okay. Well, fascinating. I remember both these cases. And Jim, I know you were involved with both of them. What's interesting to me now is back then, 12 and 11-year-old, it was like, wow. Nowadays, I'm sorry, it's not even a surprise. Times have changed.
Well, I think the one thing to remember about Jefferson and McLaurin were their age differences. Now, Jefferson got arrested for a murder at age 13, but that case ended up getting dismissed. Then he got arrested on aggravated robbery, went to the Department of Children's Services, then he got out, and then he got arrested on another murder. So he went into the Department of Corrections on that conviction, I think as a 16 or 17-year-old, 15 years. McLaurin was convicted of second-degree murder at age 12. Carl Dean represented him, and by law, he could not go to the Department of Corrections. So he went to the Department of Children's Services, where he stayed until he was 18. So that was a 6-year window where he was being treated by the Department of Children's Services, which is phenomenal. And at the end of that window, he had gotten his GED, he was smart, he was articulate. The Huber family, the victim in that case, reached out to us, wanted to get him pardoned. We couldn't do it, so when he turned 18, he went into the Department of Corrections. But I think the difference you see when you interviewed Jefferson in prison and you interviewed McLaurin in prison is that McLaurin had a big window of opportunity to be treated and rehabilitated as a child.
I see. Yeah.
Whereas Jefferson did not. He went straight into the Department of Corrections, which didn't do a whole lot for him.
Yeah.
And is that much of the gist of what you're looking at, the difference that can be made by having that kind of help when you go in that young?
Well, here's the thing, as Jim alluded to, Terrence McLaurin was then moved into the Department of Correction to serve out the rest of his sentence.
Okay.
And things basically went downhill from there, and he was released from prison, and since then he's been arrested more than 24 times. He has not been able to stay out of trouble.
So could you make the argument, had he not been transferred, which he had to, I guess, under sentencing, but maybe been released, I don't know, in some limited way after the treatment he had received, he might have been able to stay on the right side of the law?
You know, that's the argument that people make.
Right.
That
I don't know. Yeah.
under the blended sentencing model that we had in the Sunquist Juvenile Justice Reform Commission, that you need to extend the jurisdiction of juvenile rehabilitation out to 25, 26 years old. That way, when a 16-year-old does a violent crime, the juvenile court can maintain jurisdiction over the child as they go into the adult system, treat and rehabilitate them, and get them old enough to where they can be released away from the community that created the problem,
Okay.
with the capability of maintaining themselves with a decent trade.
Yeah.
We just don't do it.
Right.
No.
Right. I mean, that's one of the things we look at is, you know, that were they prepared to be released? And Andrew Jefferson says absolutely not. I mean, he got out and he was in his early 30s, and he said, you know, I grew up in prison.
Yeah, that's all I knew.
And, you know, I spent all of my 20s in prison. That's all I knew. I was institutionalized. I was a product of the prison, and I got out, and, you know, he tried. Why don't we listen to what Andrew Jefferson had to say from our first
love
clip?
to hear it. Okay, yeah, we have several clips we're going to show this morning, and the first one we'll show you. This, again, is your recent interview with him.
It starts out with the clip of what he was telling us when we first talked to him in 2003, and then we asked him about that same interview.
Very
when we talked to him.
instructive. Let's have a look at that.
Jefferson told us that when he was done serving his sentence, he would do whatever he had to, in his words, to survive.
By any means necessary. If that's whatever it take for me to make it, then I'm gonna have to make it.
Robbery,
I mean, if that's what it's gonna take,
selling drugs,
if that's what it's gonna take,
murdering.
I mean, if that's what it's gonna take.
Now, 16 years later,
I don't remember that.
we met Jefferson again for a rare prison interview at the Trousdale Turner Correctional Center.
You know, then you was talking to a young man then. So, you know, I was still stuck in my ways and being young.
Does it surprise you that you said this?
It really do. Because I don't think like that now. I'm a whole different person, so.
Jefferson says he's not the same street tough kid he was when he first was arrested for killing someone.
Interesting, right there. And he admits he's a changed man now. When will he be getting out? Do you know? Is it?
Not until for 25 years.
He has 25 years.
He had a variety of drug and weapons charges, and because of his past convictions, he received an enhanced sentence and basically had the book thrown at him. So he's in there for 25 years.
I know when we were talking, Jim was like, did you go talk to him again? What did you think, Jim? Usually the first time you've seen a snippet.
I've told the story, and it may already be on one of your clips, and I'm sorry if I'm telling it again. I never will forget when he got arrested that third time for that second murder, and I interviewed him with a detective, and I said, Andrew, why were you out selling drugs, which is what led to this murder? Well, and I was being a jerk, and I said, were you trying to get money to buy Jordans or jewelry? And he said, no, Mr. Todd, I was trying to get enough money to get my mother and my brother out of the projects. And as you know, a few months later, his brother, Timothy Jefferson, arrested for murder too. So it shows you the failure of the juvenile system, and you think about if you had just had the opportunity to work with that guy, you could have A, saved victims' lives,
right,
and B, saved his life, and C, saved a ton of money. How much money does it cost to incarcerate a person a year? And do the math on how many years he's been in prison.
Exactly.
If you spent it early on.
Yeah, I mean, and as long as I've interviewed you, I mean, I've been doing these. Yes,
or you can pay me later.
I've been interviewing Jim since 1995 on these stories, and we've talked about this issue. And you all have said this. You said this back then, and you continue to say it. As you said, pay me now or pay me later. And
25 years later, almost,
here we are,
and nothing's really changed.
Yeah.
And listen, we have to take a break on that note. By the way, we're not only on the Plus right now, where you can call in. We have some calls already coming in. We're also streaming live on Facebook at newschannel5.com. If you want to comment us or follow there, we'll try to get to your comments as well. We have more clips and more with our guests. We talk about this very important topic. Back right after this.